All right, coaches, we'll make a start. Firstly, sorry, I've got Jason, you got your sound on, man. Sorry about that. We'll get into it. Thanks for joining us again. Usual housekeeping, if you can stay on mute and put your questions through to me, that'll work best. So just send them through and I'll ask at the appropriate time. I'm very lucky to have two great presenters on tonight, and I'll start by introducing Guy Molloy. He probably doesn't need much of an introduction. Most people would be aware of Coach and his background, extremely extensive. Obviously, currently the WNBL head coach with Melbourne Boomers and has been for quite a while now. The Ferns, New Zealand Ferns head coach, and also obviously former NBL coach with Cairns, along with multiple other high performance and professional coaching roles. So he's going to present on ideas to improve any offence. He's currently the busiest clinician in Australia. He's got 3 clinics in the next 3 days, and luckily we're first. So extremely grateful for him giving up his time and looking forward to seeing you present, Coach.
Hey, thanks, Reece. It's an honour to present. And let me make a disclaimer. At 54, my technological skills aren't the best. So bear with me. And if I screw things up, we'll try and make it happen. I'm just trying to share my screen here. And Reece, can you help me? Is this coming up? Okay, Reece, have we got a screen there?
Yes, we do.
Well, that's a great start. So my topic, ideas to improve any offense. And, you know, it's I got some great advice early in my career in the complicated world of basketball to find some things that you like and investigate, study them deeply, because there's too much to cover, too many things that we can potentially do. And over the last week or so, just because I've known some of these webinars have been coming up, I've made a list of things that I've seen presented. And so these things are in vogue, and what a list it is for high-level offensive concepts: space, pace, decision-making, gravity, formations that you can be in from 5 out to horns to diamonds, boxes, disguising actions, telling the defense you're doing one thing, doing something else, dribble drive motion, everything involved with pick and roll offense, which is a universe unto itself, whether that's the middle, the side of the floor, which is kind of where things started. And you know, now we've got these things like Spain pick and rolls and drags and pistols and so on. We're pre-screening the driver, pre-screening the screener. The options aren't just pick and roll. They're short rolls, pops, slides, rescreens, twists, and these other things, veers, ghosts, off-ball movement, floppy, zipper, flare, so on. Combining those actions, connecting those actions, creating flow in your offense, and then you get to play behind the play. So reactions to dribble penetration and post feed, how you create and maintain advantages, offensive rebounding situations. So, gee, that's a list. It's complicated. And how do you develop a workable system and philosophy out of that? And we're all time poor. And that's just a heap, particularly if you're a younger coach and you're trying to find a way forward. And look, my quest has been to really go the other direction. And particularly for the last number of years, my idea has been a quest for simplicity. And what I mean by that is it's not to say that none of those other things are important, because they are if you want to keep up with the world of basketball. but I've been trying to get to the defining models and methods and ideas and principles that really work behind all those things that can be condensed into a workable system for the coach, and so that the coach can then go and convey them to the players. And a couple of great quotes there from Einstein: everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. And what he's referring to there is that as we have a quest for simplicity, simplistic can't do it, because if your offensive approach is simplistic, it will certainly be worked out quickly by the opposition. So in the hunt for simplicity, we can't go too far. And as Steve Jobs says in the second quote, simple can be harder than complex, and you have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple, but it's worth it in the end. And I think that that's a great quote, because it is very difficult these days to resist the volume of information that's flowing your way, to say, this is great, and do this and do that. And I know, speaking from many, many years of pro experience for men, women, and internationally, that some of these things that you see here and on this list, sure, you're gonna face those things at a pro level of basketball, but you know what? You might see some of these things one time in a game, and they're usually built on top of other things, and so they're not really necessarily starting points by which you create a philosophy. As I've gone down this path, and really the ideas contained in this is where I want to go tonight, but as I've been down this path, many years back, I came across some quotes that I kept, and they made a big impact on me. And this guy, Adam Gopnik, was just a sports journalist who wrote a book, and he had this line that resonated with me, that all sports take turns being dominated by their defense or their offense, and fully evolved defensive tactics will in the end beat offensive ones. Now, you could debate that, and you could look and go, well, does a great offensive team ultimately win, or a great defensive team? With the analytics and data that they crunch these days, maybe it's a 50-50. The myth in sport that great defense will win. His last part of the quote, though, he says, because it is always easier to break a sequence than to build one up. And that's what I really agree with. And that made a lot of sense to me, because any time that I've tried to coach things that are complicated with many moving parts, usually the defense can find a way to throw a spanner in the works pretty quickly. And hence you'll lose confidence from your players. And I think breaking things down is always going to be easier than building them up, because you might, for example, work on anything, and you could put, let's say, a week or a month's work into something. Someone comes along with a casual criticism that tears the whole thing down, and that's a 2-second endeavor by them. You could be with your kids at the beach, and you take half an hour to build a sandcastle. Someone else comes along and walks over it, and they crush it in 2 seconds. So you can spend just days working on an article or a paper, or writing something out, hit the delete key, and it's busted, it's done. So it's always easier to break things down, and that's why I think the defense often does have a big advantage. And so we've got to find really great principles of offense that are practical to the level of the player that we're working with, and things that have got to be pretty robust. Many years ago, I came across this book called The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, and the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer was based on this book. And in my thinking at the time, this really struck a chord with me. And so as you read through the quotes there, so everyone knows the story of Bobby Fischer, or maybe if you're younger you haven't, but Bobby Fischer, who's the picture down the bottom of the screen, won the 1971 World Chess Championship, I think, from Boris Spassky, was the Soviet champion. And it was like, it was the Cold War that was fought without bombs, and Fischer won it. And then many years later, this kid, Josh Waitskin, sort of became a phenomenon that they found just playing chess against old guys in the park. And he was 5, 6 years old. And his dad took him to this coach, a guy called Bruce Pandolfini. And instead of teaching or coaching chess like everyone else did, where you just start with a full chessboard, it says Bruce began our study with a Baron chessboard. And he had 3 pieces on the board. And he had a king and a pawn against a king. So just 3 pieces on the table. And as it says in the quote, most of my rivals, on the other hand, began by studying opening variations. And there's a vast body of theory that begins from the starting position of all chess games. And so that strikes a chord, right? Because if you go back to the previous slide, I put a vast body of theory or methods that you could use to start your basketball offense. And then in the last quote, he says, well, why not begin from the beginning, especially if it leads to instant successes? But the answer is quicksand, because once you start with that list of things that I've put out there, there's no way out. And then this last sentence, lifetimes can be spent memorizing and keeping up, and they are an addiction. And I think that's the thing, what I see so much with coaching these days, that to have the in thing and the newest pick and roll variation and the play with the flare screen and the down and the pin and the middle pick and roll and the Spain action, those things are an addiction. But I contend that they're actually quite a minor part of the craft that we should be learning. Just moving on, the things that I have as underrated coaching skills, no doubt, courage of convictions is an essential one, because everyone coaching at some point is going to be tested, whether that's tested by players, whether it's tested by parents, in my case, whether it's tested by boards or ownership or media or what it's going to be. And all coaches must possess the courage of their convictions to say that the things that you choose to do will always be a trade-off. And what I mean by that is that you have to believe in what it is that you do, but in making a decision to do those things, you're giving up the chance to do something else. And without that bit of steel, without that bit of backbone, you will be tested. And it's really important that you do find the courage of those convictions. And that's kind of that hardness of your personality certainly is one end of a scale. And if you look at the next point in empathy, well, you probably think that that's the other end of the scale. But look, I've got no doubt that that is the most important people skill that we can have in coaching these days, because we have to be able to put ourselves in the mind of the person, the player that we are working with. And once we're able to make that particular connection, then we're really able to get a lot done. And to me, this is one of the big transformations and revolution in coaching in the past 8 to 10 years. The third point I've got is a beginner's mind. And as I work with coaches that I do some mentoring with, this is usually an area that I think us as coaches, we tend to assume a context, we assume a pre-understanding, even for advanced level players, that we can jump into something, be it a workout, a training session, a particular play or offense, a film breakdown, that we can kind of jump in because we've been doing this over and over and we've been doing this study. And so we kind of can jump in at point C or D, and we forget that, hey, sometimes the player's got to start right back at point A. I have a personal challenge here on these things. So every now and then I set myself a bit of a goal to go and learn a completely new skill. And, that can be anything. It doesn't need to be too complicated, but it could be cook a meal, or it could be go and learn a new lift at the gym, or anything at all, really. And it puts you right back into that beginner's mind. And I think that many coaches that I see are just so darn dedicated and just in the moment with what they're doing, that they fail to appreciate the state of mind of the player that they're dealing with. And that's why those 2 points, empathy and beginner's mind, are really important. The fourth one, human movement literacy. I really believe that it's incumbent on all of us to understand the fundamentals of human movement, and that will help your coaching, because it will certainly assist you if you know how people were meant to move. And there are so many things that we are exposed to that you could take as gospel truth that are actually not correct. So for example, if you come across something where, let's say a YouTube video or coach is telling you the right thing to do is to take a long first step as you go one-on-one to the basket. Well, taking a long first step and coming out of your base is not something that a 100-meter sprinter at the Olympics will do. You watch a film of Usain Bolt, that's not going to happen as he starts a move. So your initial driving step in one-on-one play is a step it's well in the base of your shoulders. It's actually a short step. I know dealing with female athletes, which is kind of my world these days, is that we're prone to so many ACL injuries. And look at the AFLW and jump landing mechanics, squat patterns, they can tell you a bunch. And if you've got the ability to recognize and diagnose that, hey, the way that you're landing, your joints are all over the place and that's a mess. And you can't balance on one leg, you can't single leg squat, you don't know how to lunge. All of those things, basics of running technique, I believe that we all need to improve our literacy with those things. And then the fifth point, and understanding connection, we think, well, that's connection with the player, connection with teammates, and it kind of is, but connection exists in all phases of basketball. I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about the connection the player's got to make with the basketball, the connection they've got to make with the floor, the connection they make with the basket, connection with teammates and opposition. But then, you know, that also gets into your externals, because connections with fans, connections with referees, all those sorts of things will really have an impact that the coach is able to assist players with. Okay, because I'm going to keep referring back to this. This is a 4-step process by which I pretty much go about all our offensive and defensive teaching. And all the coach educators these days will talk to us about the value of small-sided games and decision-making drills. And, you know, I think that's great, and they're really good tools. I have 4 tools listed there for you. The first one, I've got a technical slices where there's no defense. And that's your starting point. And it's an area where you focus on your key execution points and you increase your speed as your fluency develops. And I just feel like that's a part of the game that still can't go away, or a part of coaching that can't go away. And the times they might be really reduced compared to what we used to do 15, 20 years ago. But I still think that they're a necessary step. And these days where we get told that to do some stuff 1-on-0, that it might be a bad drill to do, I would rather say to you that, look, it might be a suboptimal tool, or it might be a poor tool, and you can find a better tool for you to do your teaching with. And if we remember and go back to what was when I was growing up and studying coaching right back from the 80s, is that the masters in the field, people like Coach John Wooden from the US, well, if you look back to all their practice plans and what they used to do back in that era of time, by today's standards, all their tools were quite poor, because they spent a lot of time doing 1-on-0, a lot of time doing 3-man weaves, continuous 3-on-2 fast break drills. But what they were, even given by today's standards some poor tools, they were actually master teachers. And that's what I'm pushing people to invest and dedicate in their craft, So no matter the tool, these are all just tools. So to say only do small-sided games because that's the best, well, you don't want to be a poor tradesman with good tools. I would rather be a great tradesman or craftsman, even if I had to use the poor tools. So technical slices are the first part. And yes, to be honest, they're a smaller part than what they used to. The second thing is reflex development, which is a guided or a minimal defensive impact, and it adds some context to the skill, which stresses the technique. The third part is obviously the advantage disadvantage work, where we spend a lot of time these days, 3-on-2s, 4-on-3s, use of constraints such as taking away the dribble or shortening the shot clock. They're useful things to do. And then obviously live, where you've got part and whole methods. So that refers to 3-on-3, your 4-on-4, your 5-on-5, using constraints, using time and score. So my point is, I've seen some wonderful coaches that exist pretty much solely in the universe of 0.4, which means that they'll do everything live 5-on-5. And I've seen some wonderful coaches that'll operate down the other end, but they're just tools. So find the ones that work well for you and dedicate yourself to them and dig deeply with those tools and see what's effective. And then don't be afraid to slide up and down the continuum for yourself and for the team as they need solutions to problems that they might be facing when they're playing their games. Okay. And just quickly, some ideas to improve any offense. Ideas should be universal across ages and stages. You know, a lot of stuff I hear with player development these days is it tends to be really focused on the basketball and dribbling skills with the ball and shooting workouts and all that kind of thing, which is obviously important. But we do want to have a skill system that develops all players for the team. And skills for the team are the ones that are really hard to do in workouts so much, because they involve passing, they involve cutting, they involve screening. You want to make your ideas transferable to different playing modes. The things that I'll show you here tonight, that can be your offense. You could run these things, and I've done this at a pretty high level. You just put them together. You've got an entire offensive system on these ideas, or you can use them to embellish an existing style. And then the last point, really importantly, is that you want to put the power of these ideas into the players' heads, and you want to get them engaged with it and have them curious about their own learning, rather than, geez, we're just doing drills to be compliant with what the coach wants us to do. Okay, this first one is about connection with the basketball, and I've got here rotate the seams. So every one of our shooters that comes in, or every one of our players that comes into the WNBL team, no matter if they're an opal or they're a development player, they have to start the same way. So in building a connection with the ball to become a shooter, in all my study from all the best shooting coaches around the world, the most common theme is that you've got to learn to shoot the ball out of the middle of your hand. And shooting the ball consistently out of the middle of your hand, whether it's a high elbow or a low elbow, you really need to have that ball rotating with perfect backspin and rotating with a fair degree of spin. So rotating the seams for us shooting the ball is a really important issue and part of our connection. When we're learning to connect with the ball to pass the ball, it's the same thing. So in drills, we'll try and still get players to rotate the seams on the ball when we're doing technical slices, so that they're able to deliver the ball to the hands of the shooter right into the pocket and spot where they can make an effective play. And then the connection piece that we have with the ball around ball handling is usually just to pound the ball really hard with eyes up. Eyes down is usually one of our greatest sins in teaching dribbling, or eyes down being a consequence of unsound ball handling. And so pounding the ball hard, developing strength in the fingers and wrists, and associating that with eyes up is really an important thing. So our 3-step method for shooting is that we say, well, rotate the seams first, and just do that with your dominant shooting hand. Then we'll get players to add their guide hand onto the ball. And if they can shoot the ball and keep perfect rotation of their seams, then the guide hand is not unduly influencing the ball. If it is, it's usually a thumb flick from their guide hand. And so we try and take the thumb off the ball. You know, sometimes we do things by just having their finger pads of their left hand, only the 4 finger pads or 1 or 2 finger pads on the ball, or we might stick a coin between their thumb and index finger. So I'm sure you've heard of those tricks before. And then the third thing is that we get players to self-evaluate on, are they shooting the ball straight? And this is a really big thing because it's related to their connection to the floor and their balance. So when we go through idea 1, rotate the seams, we actually get the players to start reasonably close in, and they don't watch the basket. I mean, they kind of get a glimpse of where the basket is, but then they watch the seams of the ball. I mean, if they've got a partner, the partner can watch for them. But we're trying to get that rotation. But then when we get to step 3, where they're shooting the ball straight, their eyes are fixated back onto the basket because they want to get that connection. For us, it's with the back of the ring. And a teammate can tell them that they're continuing to rotate the seams. So here's an example, if you can see that diagram. And is that clear, Reece, down there?
Yep, it's fairly clear. It's fairly clear.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll just quickly go through it. There are 4 lines on there. We call the drill 3 more. If you can see the top left diagram, player 1's got a ball, rotates the seam, throws a really hard pass with plenty of pepper on the ball to player 2, and follows their pass. 2 does the same to 3, 3 does the same to 4, 4 shoots the ball. Now I've got them behind the 3-point line, but they don't need to start that deeply. If it's younger players, you might have them from 3-4 meters back. And then the whole team, 4 will shoot the ball, get their own rebound, go to the end of line 1. And so we're looking for now the players to shoot the ball straight. The coaches will be checking their connection with the floor with footwork, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And then coaches are also looking and giving the players feedback on, are they rotating the seams? So how is the ball coming out of their hands? The diagram on the top right is introducing different types of passes to it. So the pass from 2 to 4 is a skip pass, which is difficult to, or impossible really, to rotate the seams on. But the idea is that we're trying to deliver the ball from 2 to 4 in a place where 4 is ready to shoot the ball immediately. That's the duty of care on 2. And then when 4 passes back to 3 for the shot, it's the same thing. So 4 needs to rotate seams back to 3. 3's rotating seams to shooting the ball to the basket, and then they'll follow their spots and move on. And then the last 2 diagrams are just examples where we would add dribble penetration from different spots with the idea of delivering the ball perfectly into the hands of the shooter for the shot. So the point of me putting that diagram there for you, it's a really common drill we'll use for WNBL, is that this is a technical slice, so it's done without defense. It's about execution and precision of the fundamentals that we want. It is transferable across every age group, and then to progress it to towards more guided and advantage disadvantage situations is that we'll gradually add some defenders into there. Idea number 2 is something that we do quite an amount with. It's an idea with it where we embrace the outside foot. So the outside foot being a pivot foot, you've got 2 feet, as most humans do, and we classify them as an outside foot and an inside foot. And the reason that we work so much of outside foot catching and going these days is that so many defenses are in a pack style of defense. So if you look at the top left diagram, 1 and 2 are offense, and then X2 is at the free throw line where you shoot your free throw there, and they're in a very common pack defensive position. So the diagram on the top right would show you that in embracing or establishing their outside foot as a pivot foot prior to reception of the ball, so that player 2 is ready to play immediately. And that's one of the things our players hear all the time. You've got to be ready to play immediately, is that they will have that left foot anchored down. So as the ball is in the air from 1 to 2, that they are immediately ready to shoot the ball or penetrate away from the pack positioning of the defender. Now, I'm not saying that that's an absolute. I mean, because, 2x2 is going to play and close out and do other things. But just as a general principle, we want our players to have the mechanical skill to be able to do that. Now, for most right-handers, we'll find that they're very comfortable. And the issue is when we switch them to the other side of the floor and we would ask them to switch the positioning of their feet around. So yes, we are a program where we ask you to develop really fluent footwork on both sides of your body. And then the bottom two diagrams are another example of embracing the outside foot, because this is something like a dribble handoff. So as player 2 comes out of the corner to receive a handoff from 1, and this time the defense X2 is in a trailing position. Again, it's really common with pack-style defenses to trail, and therefore the outside foot is now the right foot on that side of the floor. That's the foot closest to the perimeter of the court. And by catching the ball with that right foot anchored down, we have the same possibilities. It may be square up to shoot the ball. It may be to cross over from left to right, and so on. Now, Reece, I'm going to see if I can show some video. So could you give me some feedback here whether or not this comes up? Is the video there?
Yep, we got that.
And if it's not, I know there are issues with videos sometimes as this goes along, but what I've tried to do is to slow this down to half speed and let it go. So as our players bringing the ball up the floor here at half speed, we have an exchange there. Okay, now the player with the ball throws to the high post and cuts. Now the player coming out of the corner is trying to get that top foot down. I'm going to run this back again. Passes to Lindsay Allen at the top. She's got that outside foot down to drive off the screen. Throws the ball back to Kayla at the top with an anchor foot down. Gets a lovely shot fake and drive against the closeout. Questionable little finish there at the end, but we get away with it and we miss the shot. So what I'd like you to look at really quickly is getting past the setup stage here. So in getting an outside foot down, so Maddie Garrick is there on her left foot, which is her outside foot. It's the foot furthest from the defender who's trailing on the screen. And she's trying to turn the corner now and get into that nail area. Ezzy's roll is not the best one. The nail defender, so you can see Lauren Nicholson there at the nail, which is a really common pack positioning. Our spacing's good. The ball gets thrown to Lindsay Allen, who's got now that left foot or outside foot down. She gets assisted by a really good screen here and is able to find space, draws 2 people. Now, when I throw back, as she throws back to Kayla at the top, this is where it breaks down, because by the definitions that I've given you, the outside foot here for Kayla should actually be her right foot. And this is where we want players to develop skills on both sides of their body. Now, she's a veteran opal and, hasn't been trained so long in these things, but you can see the closeout by the defender. It would have been way better because the defender's left foot is forward. If Kayla's right or outside foot was down, she had a far better drive to her right hand in the middle of the court. And if that defender had stayed there on the elbow, then the shooter down in the corner would have had a wide open 3. So it's not a bad result, but it's an indication of how we would drill that footwork and how we constantly evaluate it and try to improve it with our players. I'm just going to get off that one and move along. Okay. Third idea is something that we call me, you, me. And again, this is a really transferable idea. The me player is someone, when you catch the ball, that you're ready to play the game straight away. So with good anticipation of your pivot foot, when two catches the ball, their eyes go directly to the basket. And that's on the left diagram. And if your eyes go up and directly to the basket, you can also see 5, the player who's cutting underneath or posting underneath, whether they have a better shot than you. So me is the 2 players, shot or drive. You is the pass that you make to 5 to let them have a play. Now, if neither one of those things are open, then you can tell on the diagram on the right that 2 would swing the ball to 3 if they're open. So that's you, me, you, me. And if player 3 is denied, then the onus on creating a play comes back to player 2. Now, this is really useful because the decision-making idea or mantra that players have these days, they can play way too fast. And it's really important that when we make our catches, that players are understanding that, am I open to shoot or score? Has the defense been moved out of position? Do I have an easy basket? And then the second thing, does my teammate have an easier basket than me? And then the second half of the equation is, well, I can move the ball and now we get team play. And, it's the start of our offense. And so me, you, me is something that we teach our players, and we get into this a lot. And to begin with, it can be slow or clunky and might take a couple of seconds. I know that you get NBA teams talk about, well, the player's got to make a decision in 0.5 of a second. Now, that's great if you're an NBA player, and that's probably true. But this is a way that you could teach your players to start with, well, I'm 10 years old, so that's a bit too much. But if I think me, you, me, well, now I can make a really good calculated decision. It might take me 3 or 4 seconds to begin with, but over time that will speed up till at some point I'm going to make it really fast. I'm going to just, again, show you an example here. It's at half speed. We're coming down on the break. Our trail post is actually delivering the ball and throws it to the corner. Is that kind of clear there, Reece, that video?
Yeah, it's clear, definitely.
Okay, so our player in the middle of the screen has the ball looking at the basket. So she's in a me situation. That's Sophie Cunningham. Am I open to shoot? And the defender's coming out with a high hands closeout. So in her field of vision is our player underneath the basket. So there's an immediate me-you situation going on. Now, she's determined that neither player is open. So now her attention should shift back to the third part, which is you, as a reverse pass. She skips the ball across to the shooter on the other side of the court. They're just playing principal basketball. There are no rules here. So now as our player catches the ball here, the decision, she's got her outside foot down, which is great. The red team, Perth Lynx, are actually in a zone here, which is why they have 2 defenders on the ball. And you can really see the options that are available to Maddie with the ball. She's made a drive decision on the me count. And she's probably now looking at our player under the basket that's got a great U catch and finish. And like a lot of these things, sometimes with 2 defenders, the delivery of the pass is great, doesn't work out. And so we'd say to Maddie, well, if you couldn't deliver that pass, you need to be more patient, and we'll go through the whole cycle again. This one down here, we're coming down on the break. Again, we've got good spacing. The ball goes to the corner. That player makes an immediate me-you decision. And you can see that the Perth guard, which is Katie Ebsbury, is their point guard. She's the safety on the break, and she's got her hands full because she's got our post player, which is Ezzy. So we get a really smart you decision to reverse the ball. Now our player at the top, Kayla's doing a nice thing because she's got me-you connection with the ring, and she can see clearly now that Ariel Atkins is worried about the point guard guarding Ezzy, so she's come way off the split line to help. So Kayla makes a you decision. Now the count starts for Stella with the ball, and she's wide open. The closeout from Atkins is far too deep, and so her me decision to shoot it is going to be a pretty easy one. Okay, so that's me, you, me. The fourth idea we work on is something that we talk about ABC targets. And this has had a huge impact in our thinking. And again, it's a really simple idea. So if you look at the top left diagram, when we're teaching our players, and this is how we try and improve all our players as passers. And WNBL, particularly in recent times, we've had always a very, very high assist to turnover ratio as a team. And I don't think that we've had natural passes that have necessarily come into the program, but the ABC teaching idea has been a really profound one for us. So player one and baseline out of bounds are a really easy way to start teaching this. So we, instead of having numbers, will teach our players who are our A, B, and C targets. So that tells player number one, well, that's who I've got to look for first. So rather than the complexity of the whole court, well, where can I look first? And so we know in our basic setup that she'll look at player A. And if player A is not open, then I'll look for player B. Player B is not open, then I'll look for player C. And it's a great way to slow players down. And here you can see our actual setup from a game against Flyers. And we've got exactly that. And if you follow my mouse, there's the A target at the top, there's the B target, and there are the two C's who are our post players. And they're working with some other cutting and screening ideas that we've got. That's why they're all hands on their knees to create a little bit of separation from their defender. And also because we talk about sprinting into all our cuts and screens. And so we want them from a dead stop to a complete sprint. Okay, so just bear with me. Okay, just coming back to our video here now. You'll see there's our ABC setup, and there goes our A cutter, there goes our B cutter, and then despite all the bumping by the defense, the B cutter is open. On the next one here, and how we extend this idea. So we've got our A is just out of screen at the top, our B is on the opposite elbow, and our C's. And by the way, I'm pleased in the video because 32 and 22 there are both doing something we call too wide in screening. So they've got their feet wider than the base of their shoulders to set good screens, and hopefully the referees are friendly to us. And if you look at this play, we're down to 5 seconds on our shot clock. And so it's a short clock situation, but all we do, without getting complicated, we just change our target. So right now, because Kayla is a really good post shooter, Kalani is going to go and look for one of these players to screen. And so the postman becomes the A target in the play. There's the screen. There we throw it in. And there's our A. And we've only really got time for an A because it's a short clock situation. We might, there's a separate B, but it usually doesn't come off. There's our A, Bs, and Cs again. So there goes our A cutter. There goes our B cutter. The defense switches, zones, whatever they're going to do. And there's our C right in the middle of the lane. And the reason that I really like this one as a teaching point is that if you look at, and it's just out of screen, unfortunately, but the eyes of the passer, and this is a great teaching point, particularly for young players, when we're trying to develop the passing and decision-making IQ. We tell them to hit the first player that's open, but we also tell them to pass fake to each player as they come off. So you can see the inbound passer there, Stella, actually pass fakes there. So she has 3 pass fakes, which kind of convince her, well, that player's open or not open, and she makes the right decision in the end. And so ABC targeting, baseline out of bounds are really easy, but they extend, right? So here we hit our B target, and then it's an out of bounds play, so it flows into a half court set. And as we move the ball around, it ends in a common cutting or motion set. It's just a shuffle cut. So our A target, now the players are told where our targets are. So they're not told what pass to throw or what to see, or they're just told where to look. And here is where to look. There's your A. The B is down on the baseline, and the C would be the post player at the top of the court. And here we get a really sweet pass delivered to an A target. So that would be the next level of complexity. But, you know, go further up. This idea is really transferable. Take it to something like pick and roll basketball. If my video cooperates. Okay, we can't quite see it there. My apologies. That's not going to work for us. Might do on the next one. Okay, so on pick and roll. So the game's about pick and roll. And we're playing, Canberra is, you know, the reigning champs, do a really good job with their D. And we know that they're a hard hedging team with most of their pick and roll defense. And so we establish our targets, and we've got a terrific WNBA point guard, but even in middle pick and roll. So we say, well, fair chance that the A target is actually going to be Ezzy over here. The B target's your screener, and the C target will be in this corner. So we can see the Canberra defender jumping out, and then the other post defender has been dragged out of the key because we've got a fairly spread alignment. But that's not really the beauty of it. The beauty of why the play works is just the ABC targeting. So there's the A pass thrown, and then after that they can figure out on their own because the defense is caught in rotation. And we get a really nice me shot at the three because it was the correct shot to take. Okay, just got a couple more before we finish. Yep, so the ABC teaching, we'll do it. We'll break it down to 2 on 1. We'll break it down to 3 on 2. We'll build reflexes that way. So our 4-step model for teaching all our plays, we'll go through that process. So we'll do a lot of 2 on 1 with it. Set plays, baseline outs at the beginning of practices, for example, to build up that decision-making and passing. There's the example in a movement set where our targets would be. There's the example in a pick and roll set. Okay, so idea 5 is have a base O. And if you have a player movement system that underpins everything else, it provides some clarity and certainty for the players so that they're always in your offense. And that can be a 5-out, a 4-out, or a 3-out. And then establish your movement rules according to the type of pass that's thrown. So Villanova, which has been a great team in Div 1 basketball in men's Division 1, I love their simple framework. So they went 4 out, 1 in. They had great shooters, and really their offense revolved around, if the pass went from guard to guard, then the guard and wing on that side would exchange. And if the pass went from guard to wing, the guard would cut through and the other players would fill around. And so it was so simple. And then fundamentally, they were so good. Their spacing and reactions on dribble penetration were outstanding. It was all that they kind of needed. And, you know, then they add other things in, but it was a great base O for them. And so this year with the Boomers, we had a 3-out, 2-in base offense. And so, junior levels of 5-out base offense that's really simple and predicated on easy rules usually means that you don't have to have a complicated number of set plays, or that they're not entirely your focus. I'm running out of time, Reece, so I'll just power on through if you like. Idea number 6 is to cut defenders out of the game. And this is a really powerful idea. If you can see in the diagram there, One has caught the ball in transition, probably caught the ball from 4, the inbounds passer. The defensive transitions all in pretty good spots, but one having the vision to just pitch the ball ahead to 2 running the lane. It's got the impact of cutting all those players in yellow out of the game. And it's something that we show our players on film all the time. Now, that's a really easy example. And it could well be, though, a subtler example is if one threw the ball back to 4 on the diagram, then that still has a small impact of cutting people out of the game. And the reason that we talk about this is that the game tends to be, or can become, very dribbling centric. And if one player is defended well on the ball, and the defensive players off the ball aren't under any real duress to have to close out in the half or full court, or they can keep sloppy vision with triangles, and they're never really tested. But by just movement of the basketball and having the ability to throw passes, if you think about where does that cut defenders out, it's a really useful concept. Now, it doesn't just have to be in the full court, that's obvious, but in the half court, whether it's just from quick passing through our MIU system, the use of faking and deception, skip passing, draw and kick. I've got something there called AC/DC. I wasn't listening to music when I wrote this. It was actually just an idea that, it's just electrical current. Sometimes you keep the current moving one way. Sometimes you alternate the current, come back the other way. And cutting defenders out is an extremely useful idea. Let me just show you some quick video here on it. So straight away, you can see the player with the ball. Lindsay Allen's in the middle of the floor. And there we've got a player streaking the court. Now, you can see if she passes the ball, then these 3 red defenders are automatically taken out of the game. Now, we prize those little things and we look for them. Now, these are obvious ones because I just wanted to make a point. So, I mean, it's a great touchdown pass, but we would want to celebrate that. Now, the next one is with a post player doing the same thing. So that pass ahead and having the vision actually cuts all those players out of the game and creates a contested one-on-one, which we're able to finish. And they're the sorts of easy baskets that we're really going to prize. And I think, Reece, that I've got one more left for you, which is my interest in passing the basketball, cutting and movement off the ball, and similar things that are found in soccer. And excuse me if I'm offending my European soccer fans who say it should be called football. But the idea of putting the ball in space behind the heads of defenders, actually finding touches in low post and high post, whether you have a 5-out offense or not, getting a third player into form passing triangles, thinking ahead of the game. And some examples of teams that have done this brilliantly. Tex Winner, Chicago Bulls back in the Jordan Rodman era. Obviously, the triangle offense was built around this concept. But they had a series of automatics where the players were taught to instinctively recognize and create these triangles and putting the ball into space. And, the recent Warriors, particularly when Bogut was playing for them, everyone was kind of oohing and ahhing about their ability to play off their post splits and how good they're moving away from the ball. But it's a really simple idea and one that transfers down to all levels of basketball. So look, just some that I wanted to talk to you about really quickly here and show. So the team that we're playing here is in a matchup type zone. And so if you look and follow my mouse, can you see my mouse on screen, Reece?
Yes.
Okay, so the ball's at the top of the key. There's our player doing a really good job to seal underneath. And here is our triangle right here. Right? So the players are taught to think in triangles. Unfortunately, there are 4 defenders, so it might not be too profitable. But offense continues with me, you, me looks. We get a little bit of movement here, and now a really clever play. Instead of trying to create front position, when our post player makes the down cut, they cut the opposite side of the defensive player. And now our triangle, if you think that that player is sealed out of the game, our triangle of 3 people, 1, 2, 3, is really playing against these 2 defenders. And that girl that's sort of sticking in there has got a problem, because we've got one of the best guards in the league wide open at the 3-point line. So the finding these triangles, and there's a me, you look, and we get an easy layup out of that one. The second example here. So the other team, we're a point up. It's in the 4th quarter. They're putting loads of pressure on. And this is actually a play that should have been a big play for us, but we kind of muff it. Now, this illustrates the point perfectly. Because as I freeze it there, what we're after, and she's just out of screen, but the player at the top forms a triangle with our passer and our player flashing to the elbow. And again, we look for these players. And so if you see the defender, the denial defender there, Rebecca Cole, we're trying to take her out of the game by putting the ball into space behind her head. And this type of blind pig, as it used to be called, is a really useful exercise. Now, our execution suffers because the 3rd player in, which is something they talk about in football all the time, the 3rd player in doesn't come far enough over to the ball, and ultimately that will be our undoing. So it becomes an equal foot race to get the handoff to punish the defense, which should have been an easy basket on the back door, and instead we get a turnover. But the actual setup was a really good one I found on video, so I wanted to share that one with you. Another example about forming triangles, and then, okay, so we can see that we've got a triangle relationship of a guard and a high post. And by throwing the ball into the high post here, we're actually putting the ball behind the vision and behind the heads of Tessa Lavey and the import there for Bendigo Spirit. And now we have some cutting action that goes off, and because the defense is late and trailing on the cut, we're able to make the pass into space. So it's an idea we really prize, looking to pass into space, creating and forming triangles, and putting the ball behind the heads of the defense. And there's another one, put the ball into space. Now they've switched, and it's meant our post player has a point guard guarding them, and she's able just to back down and make an easy spin move and lay the ball up. And so they can be ridiculously simple, and they ultimately get into the realm of more advanced things. And so here is a beautiful one, but it's the same principles. So particularly against defenders that are trailing, we call this pass curl. So the pass goes down, the defender trails, form a triangle, put the ball into space, wide open layup in a big game, and unfortunately we blow the layup. Coach killers, aren't they? But look, just some terrific examples of those concepts that I'm talking about. And Reece, I think that I'm about done. Other important ideas and concepts that we have, like your pass must make the game easy for your teammate. The pass you want may not be the pass that's open, so you've got to find another solution. We talk about that all the time, where players get too anxious and are forced into turnovers. Well, it just wasn't there. And with point 1, your pass must make the game easy for your teammate. Well, you deliver that ball beneath their knees. They couldn't catch it, or over their head. It took them out of their position. So we stress the precision of the passing. And that's why we need the drills with the technical slices and the reflex development to begin with. We talk a lot about your position being correct for one pass, because basketball is a dynamic game. So passing and standing does not help us create the types of triangles and spacing that we want to form. Be ready to play immediately is a lot to do with that connection with the floor and our outside pivot foot mentality. And then a couple of other things I probably won't get into, but at the point of the shot, the game gets interesting. And that's where we just talk about opportunities for what we do next in offensive rebounding or defensive transition. So Reece, that's probably way too much. I've just powered through for an hour. So mate, I'm happy to end it there, or if there's a question or two quickly, because I'm cutting into to Sam's time next.
I don't think anyone's going to complain, Coach. So certainly some great detail there, and some thought-provoking things for coaches of how you simplify the game, even at your level with the best female players in the country. So certainly coaches will take a lot away from that. I have got some questions, and I want to put them to you. There's a couple around the footwork you spoke about, the outside foot. So some coach just asked, could you just elaborate a little bit more on the reasoning and that again, just touch on that a little bit. And then on the back of that, if you don't mind, how do you sell the value of that particular pivot to your players? You said that Kayla comes in and you have to adjust it with her and other players will be the same. How do you sell that particular pivot to them? I guess they're sort of linked together probably.
Well, it's actually the engagement part of it with the player is just fantastic. And in her case, where she's just a professional and she's so curious about a game and she doesn't want to be put into that box of, well, I'm 30 years old and I'm an opal and about to go to the Olympics and I can't get any better. And so, but she comes into the program and we challenge her footwork in fundamental ways, and it just becomes a whole new engagement and motivator for her curiosity to find ways to become more effective, because the best players never stop learning and the best coaches will never stop learning. I mean, learn until the grave. And so we show them how it's effective. And unfortunately, there's if you think about it, and I've got my right hand up, my right hand and going diagonally down to my left foot, that's a contralateral pattern. And again, I think having physical literacy is important. So it's a contralateral pattern. It's a diagonal body pattern. And it means for me, being a right-handed shooter, I want to shoot with my right hand and I want to jump off my left foot. I want to pivot on my left foot. I want to stop, start, and turn on my left foot. And uncoached and uncorrected, that's how I'll spend my entire basketball career. Now, I might be bloody good with that, particularly if I've got inherent genetic traits that just let me get away with it. But we find that it's a better, like a football player, if you can play with both sides of your body, it just opens their entire world up. But to get on this other movement pattern, that way, it's going to take some work. Now, we actually find that they're technically a lot better that way, and they have pretty reasonable success with it because it's untutored. And they'll learn that they'll transfer learning off the other side of their body. So we find that players engage in it. Now, it's also got some other necessities, such as the corner three is a huge shot in modern basketball. And so we think that if you're in the right corner for the corner three, then your right foot should be a pivot foot. If you're in the left corner, it's your left foot, and so on. So we're definitely big on development of all this footwork for our players. And we show them and try and get them to engage with how that's making them a better player. So, but back to your first question, it's an idea. It's called anticipation of your pivot foot. So there's a famous quote from Wayne Gretzky, the hockey superstar, that he doesn't play where the puck is. He plays to where the puck is going to be. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get players to anticipate and understand the situation in the microsecond before they catch the ball. And really, this is about, well, can you pivot on the foot furthest away from the defender? And with so much pack-style defense where the defender's in the middle of the floor, the pivot foot then via anticipation should be the foot furthest from that defender, because it gives you the best catch and shoot quickly, and it gives you an ability to rip to the outside of that defender. So that's where the idea kind of comes from. And then you can, and if they're trailing over a screen, like I showed the dribble handoff footwork. So again, catching the ball on that top or outside foot is the foot furthest from the defender, and we'll break that down and drill it with our players. And look, it's not a short-term process. It does take time, but players that we've had for a number of years really start to become fluent and work it very well.
No, that's great. Thanks for that detail, Coach. You spoke about the importance of that physical literacy. Do you have any suggestions or resources, ideas for coaches looking to sort of to delve into that more? Because it isn't touched on a lot in just your traditional coach education, is it?
No, and look, it really should be, and particularly for all those coaches coaching female athletes. I mean, the general pubescent teenage girl can just have horrible mechanics that are going to lead to injury, and so they're not corrected anymore at PE at school, for example. So it's kind of on us. If they want to be better basketball players, they've got to get those joints aligned. So a couple of things there. I would say it's certainly for parents. Sometimes it's make an investment in some educational strength and conditioning with people that are on that path, not somebody that's just going to go and load a weights bar for them. It's got to be mechanical and related to basketball. But look, there are some good resources online that I can't actually remember the name of them, but what I might do, Reece, is get, there's a couple of good books I've referred to over the years. Now, I've actually got a degree in sports science, so I've got a bit of a background. It's a bloody ancient degree, but it was, one of the first ones in the country. But I did it a long time ago, but I haven't forgotten those lessons about how the body should mechanically move. But look, there's some, we're kind of blessed in Melbourne. I mean, we've got some people like Bruce Gray and Durham McInnes that will, if coaches, you wanted to reach out to those things, I'm sure they'd be able to spend some time with you as well. But I'll get those book recommendations to you and you can distribute.
Yeah, certainly Durham and Core, they have some stuff that's readily available as well, just to start.
They do a great job in the area.
Yeah, they've got some online things and that's a good one to look at. I might just try to get one more in. There's a lot there, but I won't be able to get through them all. What's the trade-off between, as a young coach or an upcoming coach, between being obsessed with the latest trends, but or going the other way, but making sure you're still open to new ideas and concepts rather than just being sort of set in your ways? What's that balance and trade-off, do you think?
Well, it's a crucial question to engage. So find what you like. And again, if you've got the courage of your convictions, that it's okay to say no to things that some of your peers like. And if a credible source of information appears on, I don't know, Twitter or YouTube or something like that, with something that looks bloody good because a EuroLeague team's doing it, or they've got their reasons for doing that, but you have to ask yourself, how does that serve you? And those things are icing on your cake. So the things that I've tried to get through today are the defining principles that your teaching method, the models you've got for learning, the models you've got for teaching and drilling, the core ideas that make a player understand the game. There's far more profit for you to invest in those things, because remember, you're not playing, right? It's the poor sod you're working with that if you try and dump all this information or dump an NBA player or something on them, they're the ones that have to try and translate your messed up, confused world at the moment. So that empathy is an important thing. So it's a really serious question. Examine your philosophy, keep writing it down. Find something you like and study it, and don't ditch it straight away. Like, give it a good chance to kind of to cook, and let it evolve slowly. Don't be in a rush.
No, it's a great point. It's a great point. There is a lot more questions, but we will look to move on just so that we can get into Sam's presentation. But very much appreciate your time, Coach. I was very lucky to have you as my mentor, Coach, last year with the state team, and learn a lot, and learn a lot more tonight as well. I'm sure everyone else involved did. So thanks again for giving up your time.
Well, you did. And thank you, and thank you to everybody for listening.
Yeah, and good luck with the presentations. There's one tomorrow. I think it's 10 o'clock on the Virtual Coaches Clinic.
Yep.
Check out
some similar topics to
Yep.
tonight, just a little bit of a different theme.
Yeah, but if people want to check that out, it'd be a good opportunity. But thanks again. I'll now introduce Sam, who's having a cup of tea by the look of it. So Sam is the high performance coach for Basketball New South Wales, the metro area, but has also been a NBL assistant coach with Townsville, amongst many other roles. Certainly a young up and coming coach in Australian basketball, and he's going to present on full court pressure defense. So with no further rambling from me, mate, I'll hand over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Reece. Firstly, what a great presentation. Thanks, Scott, for that guy. I do apologise if I start rambling on about some offensive ideas through this presentation, as my mind's wandering right now. Just a couple of little things. One of my housemates is a Bitcoin trader, so if my internet does lag, I do apologise. But on the upside, if you want some information about trading Bitcoin, just reach out and I'm more than happy to pass your details on to him. My presentation is on full court pressure defense. So I guess my philosophies and my experiences, I was lucky enough to have quite a lot of very high level mentor coaches growing up. And they've definitely embedded in me the belief that full court pressure D is a great system to implement to juniors as well as seniors. So I do firmly believe in this system, and I definitely think it's a system that's exciting to watch. It's a system that you have to be passionate about. You have to want to get on the court and coach it, and then hopefully that transfers to your athletes, and that creates a buy-in through some culture and whatnot. So I want to take you back to a cold night, May 7th, 1995. I do apologise to any New York Knicks fans out here, but Reggie Miller had a pretty remarkable 18 seconds. And I will show this clip to a lot of our young athletes because one, it's a great offensive display, but two, their ability to go from offense to defense so quickly, the what's next mentality. And then through this little play phase, there's about 3 times where defense they fall over, they switch, the communication's late, but they make the adjustment and they fix it. So I show the athlete this because one, they need to understand that it's not always going to go according to plan. There's going to be times where we will stuff up and we'll make poor rotations, we'll make poor decisions, but it's just how we always transfer from O to D or D to O, or that next phase, the what's next mentality. So I'm sure we do all remember it. Obviously, Reggie does get a steal, hits a 3-pointer. I hope it's not lagging too much there for you, Reece, and the viewers.
It's fine for me, mate.
Good. And then see here right now, there's some separation. But what happens is they make quick adjustments, they switch. May have been a foul if you're a New York fan. And then Reggie gets a steal, dribbles back out and hits a 3. So it is exciting for young athletes to see this clip. And I do show them this. I also look to show them a clip from the 2016 March Madness, Northern Iowa versus Texas A&M. Texas A&M were down by, I think, 12 points with 55 seconds to go. And it just shows you how full court defensive pressure can essentially get you back in the game and potentially win it. So there's 3 things that I always, I guess, my values and my beliefs when putting a team together, but then also when implementing defense, a full court pressure defense. So I think our culture within the group needs to be very important, and I'll touch on that briefly at the end. Our fitness needs to be exceptional. So pre-season, season, 1%ers. And what I mean by 1%ers is like a Damian Martin type. He's unbelievable at getting deflections. He's always on the loose ball. He'll always make the extra effort. He may not guard and contain every single player, every single possession, but he'll never give up. And then from watching him when I was involved with when I was involved in NBL teams, he would be doing these, they would do these drills every session. So Rob Beveridge, the head coach, would run the same drills every session regarding the full court pressure. So it became a habit. And whenever, as human beings, whenever we get put under pressure, we always revert to habit. So we want to instill good habits in our players. And the best way to do that is to try to practice the system as much as you can. And then the last one is the system. So throughout this presentation, I want you to kind of really think about how this system may best fit into a team that you have. If you're a long, athletic, quick team, you would probably be more in the full court and we trap off the first pass. If you're a long team but not very quick, you would be in the full court, but we might trap it halfway. So I want you to really think about this. Other things I'd like to constantly talk to coaches about. I mean, what are your three? If you had to choose 3 values and beliefs when starting a team or picking a team going into trial, what are 3 things that you think you need to get done to hopefully have a championship winning team? Mark Radford last week spoke about the offensive style of play in pace, poise, penetrate. We follow that same system here in New South Wales, but we also have the defensive style of play. And our defensive style of play, again, it's 3 segments of the shot clock: first 8, middle 8, last 8. And the one I'm going to talk about today is the disruption phase. So Mel also spoke about tagging up, and we do that. We try to embed in all our athletes the communication side of it. So we have ELE. So for all our semi-pro fans out there, everybody love everybody. I try to transfer that into things that athletes might pick up quickly and what they might remember. So our communication is early, loud, every time. And then I'll go over the actual, the finer details of what you need to do in the disruption phase. However, we call it the HIT series, our full court man. So how do we evaluate if we are successful at running our full court man-to-man? So turnovers is definitely one. Quick and bad shots by the opposition, definitely. Opposition losing focus, you saw there in the video, just ways to get under the opposition's skin. Difficult to prepare for. So the week leading into the game, does the opposition spend more time on how to beat your full court man-to-man than spend more time on how to prepare their offensive system or their defensive rotations for you? So that mental pressure. Opposition players feeling uncomfortable, so we will put them in situations where they're not used to being in. We force tempo, we disrupt the offensive flow. Fatigue, it's a cumulative effect. So we hopefully by the 4th quarter, the point guard has been worn out because we're constantly in and full court pressure. And then by the 4th quarter, hopefully they've gotten quite fatigued and tired, and that's when we might overcome them. Unplanned timeouts from the opposition. So coaches call timeouts that they're not used to doing. That's a big one that I think kind of gets overlooked sometimes when we show some sort of pressure defense or some variation in offense, and make depth a factor. So who's 6 to 10 is better. Now with this, we need to remember that you're not going to stop everything. You're going to give up layups. There's going to be times where there's bad rotations, but we have to be comfortable with that. Be comfortable with the mess, essentially. Be comfortable with the layups we're going to give up. But when we do a statistic over the course of a game, hopefully if we run this 20 times, 5 times they might get, 4 times they might get open layups, 10 times they might shoot poor shots, and 5 we might get steals. So it's about the whole process of it, not just necessarily 1 or 2 plays where we might make mistakes. Then what are your non-negotiables? So what are the things we as a team do not give up, like kick ahead passes, blow-bys, those sorts of things, which I'll touch on. So when would we run a disruptive defense? Generally, you'd maybe look to run at the start of the game to establish dominance over the opposition, to see how they handle the pressure, to see the coach's tendencies and reactions. That's something your assistant coach can really observe. Out of timeouts, or change out of a timeout. So if we're running a full court rotation, and I'll show you them later, but if we're running one, timeout happens, we might come out and run something completely different, just so it's unpredictable. After a free throw, the backup point guard perhaps comes on. Video preparation, so leading into the game, when we watch the film, we break it down, we'll see when's the best time to perhaps run the disruptive D. And then have the athletes understand when and why we run our full court pressure D. So they're not shocked when you're wanting them to do it, but also why we do it. If you explain to the athlete why we're running something, I feel like there's more buy-in from the group, as opposed to just you telling them what to do. If you say, hey, we're doing this because their backup point guard's on, we feel like he can't handle the ball as well, then I feel like there's gonna be more buy-in. Obviously, have your assistant coaches stat when was the best time this happened during this exact team. And then at the end, when you review the game, you can kind of go over it. But then when you play them second time around, you might have the notes, okay, well, it worked when we did this, this, and this. So here we have our defensive positions and roles. So we refer to 40 in the full court, 30 in the at the 3/4 court area, and 20s at half court, just so you're aware. Our first position here is the plugger, which most of us have a pretty good understanding of this. But the plugger in this situation, this diagram, I'd have their right foot on the baseline, so there's no chance the pass can go towards the split line. I'd have hands up, so we're causing quite a lot of pressure. Okay, so we're smothering the inbound pass. We want to sprint behind the line of the ball when it gets thrown in, and you always want to be ball side of the split line when you're plugger. That's a very important point, because if you're too far or too close to your player, then it allows a gap for the point guard to drive through. Their closest hip faces the ball. So again, when X4 gets to the plug position here, their closest hip would be their left hip. So their closest hip faces the ball, puts in an open stance so they can see their player and the ball. And then communication, which we've spoken about earlier. The next player we have is called the ball defender, or some people call it the dog. Their roles are to apply pressure. So we don't want to let the point guard sweep through here. And we also don't want to let the pass get thrown over the top. So in this diagram, X1's left arm bar is in their hip, okay, in the offense's hip, and then their right hand's in the passing lane, and we're forcing to the closest sideline, the corner here. And then on the catch, they're one arm's length away, they're leveling off so there's no blow-bys, showing hands if there's any contact, and then if they get beat, they sprint to spots. The next two players are the lane defenders. So a very important positioning point of these two is what we call 1/3, 2/3. Now in Europe, they're doing a lot of 50-50. So instead of the player standing here, they might be halfway between the ball and their player. But 1/3, 2/3 essentially is 1/3 from your player and 2/3 from the ball. Make sure you, I guess, explain that to the athletes because they don't quite know. So making them aware what 1/3, 2/3 is. They also take away space, making it look like there's less space for the ball handler to dribble penetrate through or pass penetrate through. No kick ahead passes by the ball side, which would be the X2 in this situation. No middle passes, so X3 is opening up. And understand that these two are interchangeable. So if 4 did run the baseline, if the ball had gone in, X3 deny, X2 open up. The last one is the captain or conductor. They're 1/3, 2/3 positioning also. Communication, so they're kind of maybe letting players know of people cutting to the middle or down the sideline. They are seen by the ball handler, so that ball handler is less likely to throw full court passes, and they're a rim protector, helping them understand that we're not necessarily trying to block the shot, get steals. It's there to protect the basket. A lot of guards will break the press or break the full court man and then come up against the 5 who is hopefully protecting the rim. So this is our 40 hit. So our 40 hit's our first kind of phase of our full court pressure, and it's a trap on the first pass. So I tried to think about different platforms to show the videos the best, and I felt like diagrams didn't quite show the movement patterns as well. And unfortunately, we just can't get on a court right now to actually video some. So this was the platform I used. It's called Coach Note. And here, we just briefly spoken about our positions on the previous slide, but when the pass gets thrown into 1 here, so I'll just refer to the X or the defenders as numbers, and offense can be just offense. Oops, sorry, let me go back to that one. That didn't work properly. It plays automatically. There we go. So X1 will force the offense to the corner. And then as soon as the pass gets thrown, X4 or 4's going to run at their teammates' inside shoulder. So that's a very important point about any trap situation. So when we're going to trap the ball, we want to run at our teammates' inside shoulder. If we don't, we're more susceptible to getting split and the point guard going through the trap. Now, we also need to make sure the point guard defender doesn't allow them to go down the sideline. So X2 is in the passing lane, so there's no kick ahead pass in their 1/3, 2/3 positioning. Closest hip faces the ball, so they can see both. And when X4 goes to trap X3, now they can be halfway, like we spoke about how European teams doing that a lot. Their responsibility then is to go and steal and hopefully score. Or if they don't steal the pass, they jam 4 who's got the ball. So that way now their first step is backwards. In our trap situation, who goes to trap leaves the trap, because we try to eliminate our mismatches as such. So if we can keep our point guard here to deny the pass back, then we feel like that's a better situation for us. Now the backline rotations, it would depend on your team. If you feel like your 5 is mobile and agile and athletic, I would get them to come out and rotate. If you feel like your 5 isn't quite that and they're massive and they're a great rim protector, I might keep them at the basket. At a younger age, I would probably teach them every position so they have a good understanding. But when they get older, you might then put players in positions to be successful. So here, if the ball gets advanced up, it's the same thing again. 5 steals it or jams it, and then 2 would fill back or drop back and be a protector, rim protector as such at the basket. 4 is sprinting back. Now, this is possibly the most important rotation. So 4 sprints back. If they get equal 2 and 4 and the ball hasn't gotten thrown, 4 can take 5 and then 2 can stay attached to their player. If that isn't the case, then 2 can take 5. And then we spoke about the most important rotation before. 4's got to sprint back so 2 doesn't get a pass under the basket for a layup. As John Wooden always said, or as he said, mismatches don't beat you, open shots do. So just helping the athletes understand that you may have to guard someone that isn't your player, but what we don't want to give up is open shots. The next rotation I guess, arm of our defense is our pack 40. So understand the alignment is essentially all the same. There's just different wrinkles out of it. So why would we pack 40? And pack 40 is where we trap the point guard before they get the ball. So we want to disrupt their offensive flow. We feel like they have a dominant point guard. It's a cumulative effect again, and then hopefully have someone else start their offense. So here, as you'll see, X4, instead of being on the ball, they're going to go and trap 1 before the pass gets thrown in. Now, this is a great play. We have another one called face 40, and that's a little bit harder to get, but this is a great one after a score, like a live play situation. The 4 can then go and find the point guard and stop them getting the catch. The 1's positioning here, I'd probably have them a little bit towards the middle, just so there's no lob pass over the top. And then the 4 can step a little bit towards that way so they can't sweep through. So we want to encourage no split, no foul from 4 and 1 at the moment. Again, like I said, X1 plays slightly behind. Our 2 and our 3 have proactive movement, so they anticipate the lead. A lot of times on D, it's all about being reactive. So just making the defensive players aware that they've got to try to be proactive. So anticipate it, and that's the purpose of being 1/3, 2/3 as well. Now, in this situation, there may be a lob pass over the top here that I've shown, but again, as I spoke previously about, we can't stop everything. So there's going to be a time where that lob pass does happen, and how we transfer from that situation to the next one, as opposed from as seen in the Reggie Miller clip, will determine how good we are. So then we need to sprint back. Our next one is 30 hit. So Brisbane Bullets ran this a few years ago, and they're quite successful at it. So 30 hit, we want to trap kind of around the 30 that area here, 3/4 court, like I spoke about earlier. So key coaching points in this one, X1, we want to force to the corner, level off, and then 4 is to turn and plug and sprint and plug back to not allow 1 to get through the middle. So they're presenting a crowd. X2, again, 1/3, 2/3, no kick ahead pass. So that's essential and very vital that they do that. We have 1 now kind of forces to the side, X3, they need to open up. And I guess one thing I want to mention, because James Harden's notoriously bad at this, is ball watching, right? So whenever we are off the ball defensively and we need movements, it's very important that we need to jump to the ball, which we all teach and preach our athletes to do, but then always check where you came from. So if I jump to the ball, I then want to have a quick look back at where I came from, as what 3 just would have done then. So they jump to the ball, they have a quick check to see where 3 is, and then they can see 4 and their player. So here, as the ball's getting dribbled up the court, 2 can kind of hedge, recover, stunt, recover. 4 backs off a bit. Okay, just making sure the second line and the 5 at the back's engaged. And then when they cross the ball back over, 4 goes the trap. So this is 30 hit, we're getting it a 3/4 court. Now, again, depending on your 3 and how good they are, athletic, how well they read the situation, they might stunt and recover, or they might run and intercept to steal the pass. So that's something you would determine based on your team. And there, they stunt, recover. In junior basketball, we're pretty aware that 4s don't like to bring the ball up the court. So they are more likely to get that catch and look to kick ahead. That's why we have that 3 in that stunt recover situation. And then it allows 4 to then rotate and cover 0-4, and then we're matched up from here. Have 2 more here. This one's called 20 hit. So it's pretty much the exact same as 40 hit, just in the half court. So why would we run 20 hit instead of 40 hit? Earlier, I spoke about understanding your team and their strengths and weaknesses. If we're really quick, we get up the floor. Also, understand the strengths and weaknesses of the opposition. When we played Adelaide 36s a couple of years back, Jerome Randall, I mean, electric and unbelievable in the full court, and just Adelaide as a team is great in the transition game. We figured out that when you broke the shot clock up into 3 segments, Adelaide would score at a rate of about 75% if they got a shot in the first 8 seconds. If you could hold Adelaide to the last 8 seconds, they would score at a rate of 18%. So we wouldn't full court press them. We would, if we wanted to chuck a situation in where we kind of rattle them a little bit, we'd 20 hit them, so at halfway. So again, as a coach, understanding the opposition and what they're good at, and then you've got to make those adjustments in game and pre-game as well. So the pass, again, 1 forces the offensive play to the corner. X4, as soon as the ball gets thrown in, they get into a plug position. X2 is in denial, so there's no kick ahead pass. X3, as we spoke about earlier, they're opening up to the ball. And again, check where they came from. All right. Very important that 4, as soon as the ball gets thrown in, they're turning and sprinting back to plug the gap, so there's no dribble entry or down through the middle of the court. And then our X5 is more conservative in this situation, and our X3 is a little bit more aggressive. So 1 is channeling with adequate ball pressure down the sideline. 2 is stunt recover, so there's no kick ahead pass, so they're taking that option away. 4 is backing off, 5 backs off, and so does 3. So we're just kind of moving back as a unit. 1 continues to force the player to halfway. And as soon as it gets to halfway, 1 gets in front of them, 4 will come to trap, running at their teammate's inside shoulder, and 3 will go and steal or jam the pass. And as I spoke previously before about your rotations out of it, it would depend on your group. Is 5 quick enough to rotate out? In this situation, probably not. I would keep them at the basket a little bit longer, because this is a shorter pass from 4 to 5 than what it was back here. Okay, so I would maybe keep them at the basket a little bit longer. And again, like I said, does 2 rotate across? Does 5 go? It's something you'll have to assess your team on. This is the very last one, and this is probably my favorite one. This is the one that you can do in the game at any time. If your team does this in the game, I feel like they've become a really great full court pressure defensive team. This can be planned and unplanned. Like I just said, it can be planned in the situation of we rush the ball handler as soon as we get the catch. And it can be unplanned where we're supposed to be 30 hit, but the ball handler just beats us down the sideline. So essentially what happens here, one puts a lot of pressure on the ball handler. They don't want to get beat, but they influence down the sideline. And as that happens, X4 is sprinting the plug to start with, but they'll turn and chase their player down, or chase one down, sorry. 2 is in a situation where they hedge recover. So again, there's no kick ahead pass. 5 is at the back being more conservative, so there's no skip pass to 5. And 3 is being a little bit more conservative to start with as well. As they're coming down the floor, 2, again, stay stunt, recover. If 2 ends up going through to the other side, then that's fine. X2 can just go with them and be a low split line player. If they don't go down the side, they can just stay there and be in the denial, so there's no easy kick ahead down the sideline. And the 4 is still chasing them down. Now, chase down can happen anywhere down the sideline, anywhere. And what 4 needs to do, as they're running and chasing them down, they need to yell out, turn him or turn her. So then 1 jumps across and 4 comes from behind the trap. Now, this is a fantastic full court pressure D to run at junior basketball, especially because as soon as you give a point guard a full head of steam at that level, most of the time their head is down and we're going to chase them. And eventually they've got to stop, otherwise they run out of bounds. All right, and then the back line, again, you can have your 3 rotate to steal. They can jam it. And then our rotations are very similar to the one before in 20 hit. So guarding the ball isn't just a responsibility of one, it's the responsibility of all. So having athletes understand that, yeah, I'm not guarding the ball, I'm the plug or I'm the back. It's having them aware that everyone has a role to play. And in order for us to be successful, especially in full court D, we need to play that role, right, for the team. So just to the left, I've just got a play card. That's kind of what I have in my pocket, just so I can revert to that to help me understand what I need to run. And now to talk about kind of the breakdown of the full court pressure D, time allocated. So every practice, I'd probably spend about 20 minutes on full court D. Now I practice being an hour and a half. And then I'd only probably run about 2 or 3 situations. I wouldn't do more than that just because I think athletes is just overload of information. When would I introduce it, or when would we introduce full court man? In a team environment, at trials or in preseason, straight away. I think if you want to be great at full court pressure D, you have to do it every practice for at least 20 minutes. And if it's not every practice, you're doing it every second practice for at least 20 minutes. And I would start basic though. So it'd be a 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3 situation, and it'd be your ball defender, plug, and 1/3, 2/3. I wouldn't add in rotations just yet. So how we build it up. So how we build up a full court man-to-man D. Implement a skill that your team needs to work on to initiate the drill. So yeah, we want to work on full court 1-on-1, but how can we start the drill? So that's something each team's different in. So for example, if we need to work on walling up, we might start in the basket here or closer to the basket, the charge circle. If we want to work on closeout, which is what we're doing here, we throw it closeout and et cetera, et cetera. So that would play 1-on-1. Your other 4, 5, 6 players will be lining up, okay, just behind them, ready to have their go. 4 would go in, and obviously then we switch over. Now, you can have a variety of starts in this situation. You can have the coach throw the ball out of bounds, and the point guard and defender, or the guard and defender, or player and their defender can be at the elbow, because again, we want to put everyone in every position here. You can have them at the elbow to make leads. And the aim of the defender is to turn them 2 to 3 times before halfway. And I would have a point system. So we might do this for 3 minutes, be relatively quick as the further on we get and progress with it. Have a point system. If you get 1 turn in the backcourt, that's 1 point. If you get another turn, it's another point. If you show your hands and there's no foul, it's another point. It's not only results-based, it's giving them little incentives throughout the drill to actually kind of highlight and focus on the points of emphasis that we have. The next one would be just building into 2-on-2. So I would start again in a skill that your team needs to work on. So in this situation here, we have them starting in our receiver spots. So I would go from diag to drift and then sprint to the diag. They throw it, they close out, they'll play 2-on-2. Again, just working on what you need to do, split kick, split kick, extra passing, tagging up, and then straight into our 2-on-2. So now we have a player passing the ball out of bounds, X4 getting right up on them. So that what's next mentality, and then our point guard or guard defending them. And then what we showed earlier, we're breaking down now. A rule for this one, potentially, I would have the ball can't be advanced down the floor with a pass, which means I wouldn't allow the 4 to leak out and go. If they did do that, and this is something the team needs to be aware of, if they did do that, then they would have to go with them, or you could have them just go and trap straight away. Okay, that's in the big picture. Again, I would have a point system. So athletes, again, they're focusing on the points of emphasis, and there's an incentive to do well throughout the drill. The next one, just 3-on-3. Again, I'm starting from a different situation. The coach shoots the ball, shot goes up, players box out, or offensive players would tag up. So now they're on D, all right? And then we would have, depending on how many players, so here in the 3-on-3 situation, we'd have a lane runner ball side for our first example, and then we'll chuck in a lane runner weak side for our second one. But for the ball side example, again, just getting in the 1/3, 2/3 positioning, plugging the floor, and then making sure that there is no kick ahead pass. And a potential rule in this one might be you must dribble the ball over halfway, just to get them used to their positioning and not getting too worried. Because the one thing athletes will start worrying about with this drill is if they get scored on with open layups, then they won't believe in the system. So if the ball gets thrown across to the 4, as we just got shown then, okay, it's important that X3 opens up, helping 1 becomes the plugger, 4 becomes the ball defender. And then if the ball gets thrown back again, they switch positions. You might have a rule where the drill is not live until the ball gets thrown back to the 1, just so the 1 and the 4 can get used to ball defender plug. If the ball ever did get advanced, I would have, and I would encourage our other players to sprint and get back behind the line of the ball, so we have numerical advantage. Now, if the ball has been thrown in the opposite side, so now we have a weak side lane runner, So the defender, we might be in a 40 hit. So when your team becomes, I guess, confident enough in what they're doing, I would really have this athlete driven. So you split up your teams, lights and darks. I'd have assistant coach with one team, the head coach with the other team, and then you'd listen in, but you'd make them think or put in what they're going to do. 40 hit, 20 hit, 30 hit, chase down, whatever it might be. You have the athletes decide. So it's athlete driven. There's more accountability. There's more buy-in from that. So here, ball gets thrown in. We go and trap, right at your teammate's inside shoulder, and then 3 rotates out to try to steal or jam. And as I spoke about previously, this will happen a bit. The rule, apologies. The potential rule might be you can't allow a kick ahead pass. But in this situation, if they're going to steal or jam, then in the big picture, there would be a 5. Here is the rim protector. So just having the athletes understand that. And for the drill, you might actually put a 5 there, just so they're aware of their responsibilities if it gets kicked ahead. I would then I would then play this in a three-way situation. So you go up and back. If we're playing it and let's say we get a steal off the 40 hit, I would get them to score and then we go again. So it's just that what's next mentality that we keep falling back to ensure that athletes are continually playing like the game happens anyway. I guess that's from a X's and O's point of view, that's what we kind of really, they're the drills we do, the rotations we have, the little wrinkles we have in our full court defensive system. I wouldn't run every one of those with a team. I would probably only really work on 2, maybe 3. And the 2 or 3 that I definitely have a lot, we use a lot of 40 hit, 20 hit, and chase downs. So just, like I said, it will be based off your personnel, who you feel or who you have, and you want to put your players in a position to succeed. The first area I spoke about with what we need and what we try to preach with our team is culture. And the reason why I've got this here is a fantastic book that I've read, and I really believe in the pyramid that they have here and the process that you have to go through. So I'll briefly talk about it. So in any team environment, it's about creating a great culture. And the way we kind of first develop that, I think, is develop trust within the group. And the way you develop trust within any group, whether it's business, whether it's sporting, is discussion. So just having communication, chatting about things. And the first element of the discussion has to be a relaxed environment. So, you know, for example, I coached the under-18. I had the under-18 women's New South Wales Metro team this year. And the topic of conversation was, how many brothers or sisters do you have? Do you have any pets? So it'd be really basic and not in confronting to start with. And then we'd layer it a little bit and be, okay, well, what's the one thing that you think you need to bring to this team that you don't already? Because the thing that athletes will start to, all of them will start to do is they'll just give each other praise and prompt, and they won't really cause conflict. So develop the trust by open conversation. There's more buy-in because everyone talks. Then you dive a little bit deeper with talking about something they need to bring to the team that they perhaps don't already contribute. For example, if I was a very poor defender and then I came on and said, yeah, I need to up my 3-point percentage, we would have other athletes call me out on that. So that's that conflict element. And then it goes through all different stages and examples, and there's case studies. So I definitely recommend this book. I think it's a fantastic book to read to kind of get a great understanding of how to develop good team culture. All right, Reece, that's it. I tried to get through that reasonably quickly just to allow people to go to bed, I guess.
No, mate, that was good, and great presentation. Really good with the diagrams and things, just so people could see it, and yeah, really like how you put that together. And obviously, a great point that you only pick a few of those, because that was one of the questions I had, was how do you put that in with a team? And like you said, even with the elite teams you're working with, you'd probably only pick a couple to focus on. So you sort of already answered that one.
Yep.
You've coached boys and girls at the elite level, obviously, in varying levels. Do you think that the concepts work as well in both, or do you vary anything when you're coaching females? What sort of your thoughts there?
I guess that was one of the biggest things. That was one of the biggest questions I would ask myself when I went to coach. I think this is the second female team I've coached, and yeah, I think it works the exact same. I actually think it works better for females just because they're smarter. They make better reads. I feel like they don't rely on the athleticism as much.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it actually works better. But again, it's all based on your personnel, right? Like you could have a men's team that's not very quick, so this may not be a great defense for them. But yeah, I think it transfers both male and female.
For sure. What do you see the primary focus for you? You've got these disruptive actions. Is it just to delay and disrupt, or is it to force turnovers? What's the balance?
For me, it's to put coaches and players in a position where they're not comfortable. Yep. I think the steal is if we can get a steal, that's fantastic. But I think the the fundamentals and the main idea behind running this is just to put the opposition in a position where they're not comfortable and they feel like they're never in a situation where they have control of the game. So we're constantly changing it up. And then on the flip side to that, it's you might go into a game where, you know, I'm coaching against you and I know you run a full court man, and then I'm worrying about it all week. And then all of a sudden we get into the game and you don't run it at all. So now you've just wasted a whole week of my mental preparation and team's preparation, but you may not do it. So I think it has a lot of benefits that may not just be steals.
Yeah, awesome. You said that you put a lot of time into this, you know, 20, 25 minutes of practice, or at least every second practice. Do you ever run zone or anything like that?
Yeah, we definitely have a zone press as well. Team-based stuff, it would be, you know, we'd have probably a 1-2-2 half court, a 2-2-1 full court. I'm not playing you at nationals, so I can kind of reveal all this. And then our full court man-to-man. It is a lot. Pardon?
I'll take notes just in case.
Yeah, it is a lot. I mean, it is a lot of information, but I mean, I value defense so much. I mean, I definitely think offense is the hardest skill to teach, but I value defense. And I think great defensive teams have great culture. And that's what I value most with most teams. Yeah, I would have other elements of defense, but this would be the backbone of what we're trying to get done.
Cool. There's a couple more popping in. I'm just going to try and make sure I read them out properly. You spoke about the Europeans do that 50-50. So what are the reasons you sort of stick with that 1/3, 2/3? And would you stick with that if you're teaching pack defense as your half-court defensive system? Or would you go with the 50-50?
To be honest, probably about a week ago, I spoke to Sean Dennis about this, and he mentioned the 50-50, and I was like, oh, really? So I didn't really kind of know. And then I watched some clips on it. And their reasoning behind it was, well, I mean, they're smarter athletes. They're quicker. They can jump higher. So I think in a full court situation, I would still have 1/3, 2/3. In a half court situation, I would probably have 50-50 in a pack read. But yeah, in our full court one, I just have 1/3, 2/3 because I don't quite, I guess I don't quite trust the athletes at the moment to then get to their play if there's a pass over the top. Because this is a defense that is essentially a bluff. It's a bluff defense in the fact of if you can beat it after the first 2 or 3 passes, you're okay. Yeah. So we put a lot of our energy and effort into getting up the floor and making you and putting you in a position where you're really uncomfortable. If we get a steal from that straight away, fantastic. If we can't, well, that's where I guess we have to revert to just scrambling around. So I would say 1/3, 2/3 just to take away from that kick ahead pass.
Yep. No, that's awesome. More of a question around sort of your when you're in practice and how you work with your assistant coaches. So if you're coaching the defense, do you get the assistant coach to coach the offense and vice versa? So if we're focusing on the O, would you be getting them to constantly coach that defense, that full court pressure D?
Yeah, definitely. I would have, I would probably be if I have the luxury of having 2 assistant coaches, I'd be the referee. And I would, as the referee, I would call bad calls. I would call some fouls that weren't fouls, just to test their frustration levels. So I would definitely have an assistant coach the O, one coach the D, but I would have the athletes. That's all athlete driven. So as that's happening, the coaches are listening to the huddles, and then after the drill, or after the play phase, and they huddle back up again, the athletes have a quick chat. But what ends up happening, and every coach can definitely agree this, is you tell them to huddle up, and you say it's a 10-second huddle, and a minute later they come out. Yeah. So it's about getting them in quick, out quick, and the coaches help facilitate that.
For sure. No, that's great, Sam. That's basically it, because I think you covered off on most of the other ones that came in earlier through the presentation. So really appreciate your time and the detail you went to, and the coach really got a lot out of that in understanding your full court defensive philosophy and variation. So really appreciate that.
No, thank you. And I mean, if any coach has anything different and they do different rotations or anything like that, I'm more than happy to have a chat. I mean, I love having conversations around how those tough conversations. I love those type of discussions. So please reach out and have a chat, and we can try to evolve and progress the defense. Awesome.
I'll just flag for everyone that's on who we're going to have next week. So really lucky to have some really good coaches again. So we've got both the current Australian under-19 head coaches in Darren Perry and David Herbert. Darren's going to present on using data to drive your coaching decisions, which is going to be a very interesting topic and something he leads the way on in this country. And then Dave is going to present on leaving isolation a better shooter. So a very relevant topic at this time. So two great coaches and great presenters locked in for next week. So I hope to see you there. Thanks again to Guy and to Sam. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for tuning in.